Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar about the Customer Experience Working Group. And hopefully you're on this webinar because you've registered your interest not only in becoming part of this brand new working group, but also finding out a little bit more about what the group is about, what we're trying to achieve, and hopefully be part of the group and shape its work going forward. So just a bit of expectation from the outset, what the outcome of this webinar is trying to achieve is really give you a bit of background around the purpose of the group, the makeup of the group in terms of its current chair, as well as the support here at IWFM via myself. And hopefully by the end of it, we have a plan of action about some of the next steps. But really this working group webinar is simply about getting a better understanding what actually the group is about and what we're trying to achieve. And also this is being recorded as well, so again I'm aware that those people that have registered an interest couldn't make the webinar, but we will be cascading out, so please be aware that this will be available to yourself afterwards, as well as any other interested parties that want to be part of the Customer Experience Working Group. So, and we will be having a question section. So as we go through the slides, please fire in your questions because we just want some of those early questions from yourselves around the group. And we've allocated quite an ample lot of time to go through that. So it's only as good as your questions, I hasten to add. So I'm Peter Brogan, Head of Research and Insight, and as you can see a picture of me there, what I look like. Basically, the aim of, and if it was only this simple, I've had to summarise what the purpose of what we do here in the Institute, or what I lead up as a team, along with volunteers as well as working groups as this one, is to produce first-class research and insight, supporting FMs through a various different means in terms of guidance, webinars, just to name a few, as well as physical events. So it's not just purely about producing research and guidance, and developing content, which really is a summary of what we try and achieve here, whether that's through research or actually particular workplace and FM guidance. And this visual representation probably explains that a lot better in terms of what I mean by content. And these are available on the IWFM website. Good practice guides are a member benefit only, I hasten to add, but guidance notes and some of the research reports that are our own there are actually readily available for non-members as well. So that will actually be available for you to join. In terms of making better workplace decisions using data, that's a recent research partnership we've had with RICO, who are our support organisation on that. And that's something that we are developing as well. So a lot of our work isn't purely from IWFM or its members. Actually, we're broadening out to other partners, and collaborations are key, which I can fully understand from some of the people on this webinar when it comes to customer experience. About people and collaboration, it is at the heart of many things we do. So in terms of research and information, that's key, that we can't be seen to be going solo on such important subjects. So I'd like to introduce the chair here of the Customer Experience Working Group, Jamie MacDonald, who's also on this webinar. So you'll be hearing shortly from Jamie in terms of the slides, and you'll probably be pleased to know that you won't hear my voice throughout the whole webinar. So Jamie is Customer and Business Transformation Director for ENGIE. And just a little bit of background for Jamie, for those that haven't looked up Jamie today. In terms of Jamie, he has that role at ENGIE at the moment, responsible for supporting and challenging the business to put the customer at the heart of their very diverse workplace and facility management services in the UK. Not only that, but Jamie does chair the UK Customer Experience Leadership Team, sits on the ENGIE Global Customer Council, and also Vice President of the Institute of Customer Service, put him at the top table of UK customer service industry. Not only that, just a bit of background about his previous roles. They were at Capita Carillion and Mighty, other major service providers within the FM environment, I hasten to add. And he's at those respective companies, he was at the forefront of enhancing the voice of the customer in our industry. And he and his teams were awarded the Customer Experience Innovation Impact Award at the BIFM IWFM Awards, not only in 2010, but also in 2016 for his good work. He was also named as Customer Service Strategic Leader of the Year at the National Customer Satisfaction Awards in 2015. So I think we're in a real strong position as a group, trying to capitalise on all this experience as well as the award winners behind Jamie's role, to be the chair of this particular group and really drive through the activity. And really with that bio, not probably presenting it and giving it enough justice. Not only has he got a raft of experience in this subject area, but also got awards that have been highly scrutinised by judges to prove not only his own workings within that, but his experience from other leadership teams and working groups around customer experience. So I think from the first webinar and from the outset, we're in a very strong position with our current chair. So that was just a little bit of background about Jamie, and just between some of our listeners, I had asked Jamie to do that, but I think like many speakers, and knowing Jamie as I do, it'd be better for me to go for it as a humble guy he is. But again, that really just highlights who our current chair is, and just a little bit about Jamie and his background when it comes to customer service. So Jamie, hopefully technology is working and we can bring you in on the webinar. Hopefully I can give you keyboard control.
Go for it.
There's always a bit of a time lag with this, but hopefully that should work.
I'm trying to lose my face. It can't go fast enough.
Try that again. You try again, Jamie.
I love technology. Yes, fantastic. Well, thanks, Peter, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be involved in this very early, fresh group. I'll talk more about some of the reasons I was really keen to get involved. But the aim of this webinar really is to just begin to set the scene in terms of our current thinking about what the group could do, what its terms of reference might be, and how we could add value to the workplace and FM industry. And for me, the exciting thing is it's all up for grabs. I think it would be hard to find somebody who would say that this doesn't matter to the industry. But what we do and how we do it and how we address it, that's for us to decide. And I think that blank sheet of paper is really, really exciting. I guess in terms of why, though, I think there's a real dichotomy, and I like that word. There's a real dichotomy within the UK FM workplace sector. One thing I tend to do when I'm speaking to groups or seminars is to get people to think about a really great customer experience they've had personally outside of work, and then turn to their partner and share and talk about it. It's a nice icebreaker. But then we get a show of hands in terms of the environment, and you get quite a few from retail or holiday companies or telecoms. But when I say put your hand up, if that great experience was around your workplace or FM, often none, sometimes one or two. And that's the dichotomy. Our industry isn't famous for customer experience. But despite that, all day, every day across the UK, hundreds of thousands, if not more, of people in our industry do really amazing stuff, whether it's catering, cleaning, security, engineering, compliance, technical. Our people are delivering a really great customer experience, whether it's public sector or private, whether in-house or outsourced, all day, every day. But the dichotomy is that we're not famous for it. FM is seen as a really key thing by our customers, but we can be quite invisible. My aim is that in future years, when people think about a great customer experience, we're up there. We're up there with retail and telecoms and automotive. And I think in some respects, that needs different processes and behaviours, but it's also, I think, reputation. So I think a key aim of this group is to really raise the profile of just how good the UK's FM and workplace frontline teams are. Because I know, and you know, I'm sure, this happens all day, every day, but we're not famous for it. We're famous for some things, but not for this. And I think one key driver is that we're quite internally focused. I think sometimes we look at other members of the institution and we go to conferences and seminars. If it's outsourced, we look at our competitors. If it's in-house, we look at similar organisations. I think we can learn much more from retailers, telcos, and other ways of doing things. So looking outside of our sector to understand what's a really good customer experience and how we can learn from it, I think is really key. So in terms of some of the group purpose and vision, it's all that really. It's about advising and collaborating membership and the organisations and also the institute itself about how we can share knowledge and expertise around this customer thing. It's enriching and supporting our learning and training processes for our members and really advance the institute's goal around customer experience. The link between employee engagement and customer experience is proven and rock solid, and therefore a great customer experience drives productivity and growth and success. So sometimes I worry that the C word, the customer word, can sound a bit fluffy or abstract, but in reality, it's the surest way to drive success and development and innovation productivity, regardless of sector, regardless of self-delivery or in outsourcing. And customer experience isn't about gold plating things or going the extra mile. It's about being consistent and enduring based upon some really sound principles. So this isn't a fluffy gold plated thing. For me, this underpins and goes to the heart of what our industry is about. In terms of how we're going to work, this is a first set of thoughts. And one of the key things we'll do when we get together is our terms of reference. But this is around understanding how we'll work, our logistics, when we'll be quorate, the forums and channels we use. It's really important that if we're going to put some time into this, as members, we get things out of it ourselves. There are rules around how we work, but nice rules, so no bureaucracy, but lots of collaboration. And then fundamentally, two things flow from that. We help the institution flourish and grow and develop. And as part of that, we help drive this increasing customer focus across the UK industry around workplace and FM, and have fun at the same time as well. I think we've all been part of groups, bodies that are chores, quite hard work, and you see the thing coming in the diary and you think, oh God, it's next week. My aim is that this is a fun thing to be part of, it's energizing, it's positive, and we add value, we make our industry better. And in 3 or 4 years' time, when people are asked to think about a really great experience, more people begin to say, yes, that this really good experience at work around the workplace. I think in terms of our aims, I think we're covering some of this already. It's around making sure we know what's great within our industry and other industries, but also where government is going. Key focus on sharing knowledge internally, externally, and agreeing what best practices. Being the trusted voice within the Institute about all this stuff, all these things to do with customer experience and customer care and customer service and how they link together, but being the knowledgeable team who can enrich and support our members, using that to really drive and advance IWFM as it goes forward in its mission and role to drive that workplace and FM advantage, and where appropriate, helping to shape strategy. And I think understanding how we can really use this as a key lever for what we do is really, really important, but also really exciting in terms of how we take it forward. In terms of outputs, again, this is just some early thoughts, but I think understanding our role within workplace and FM and I guess the Institute's focus on society, we're there to promote and support the Institute, but also be a strong voice within it. It's about initiating and collaborating, sharing research, and enriching all the great work that Peter and his peers do in terms of that piece around thought leadership. It would be good to imagine a range of best practice materials and webinars, having parts of the conference involved in what we're doing, but also in terms of an interest group, having a thriving social side as well. This can't be more homework. This isn't an MBA. This is going to be a thing we enjoy doing. So making sure the way we do it is enjoyable, but also we benefit socially as well, I think is really key. And for me, it's all about raising awareness that customer experience is an absolutely fundamental underpinning element of a great workplace and facilities management product delivery mechanism. And where appropriate, linking to other bodies and accreditations, and also in terms of broader elements like the award scheme, working out the link between the work we do and the annual awards So trying to link it together in a way that is not bureaucratic, doesn't become too much hard work, doesn't become a chore. But as I say at the start, I think we're missing a trick in terms of a thing that our industry is actually quite good at, but we're not famous for. And understanding why that happens and how we close the gap is really key. As the market tightens for employment, attracting and retaining talent becomes harder. Going somewhere to work where there's a reputation and fame for great customer experience can't not make it easier to attract and retain people. And because the link between employee engagement and a great customer experience is so strong, those two things will really play in each other's favour. In terms of, I guess, what it means for you and for us, again, some early thoughts, but I think it's making sure that people who join the gang, the team, do it with open eyes. Again, I think we've all been involved in things and projects which start with a huge fanfare and full attendance, and it's great fun. But by the third meeting, you've lost the lightweight people. By the seventh meeting, there are 3 of you left, and it's the usual suspects. So making sure that people have a sense of obligation about what we need them to do, that's really important. Understanding the support we can get from Peter and his guys is really important. But also making sure that we're seen to be doing it as well. So I think recognition from our own group and other groups, and also from the institution is quite key as well. So I want this to be a good thing, but there is some commitment. This isn't a thing that'll work well with people dipping in and out. In any group, you get a core gang of people, you get a small number who are passionate and there all the time, and then you get people who drift in and out. And that works for some things. I'm not sure that's right for this. So the first next step really is to make sure people sort of reaffirm their interest. If you're listening to this now, you're interested enough to either join the webinar or listen to the recording, and that's great. Stage 2 is, based upon all of this, an interest in getting involved in helping to shape it in the terms of reference. I think we've got that in place, we understand, and we've defined exactly the rules and the logistics and requirements. Then the third validation is, yeah, based on all of that, I'm in. So this is stage 1. Stage 2 is people say, yes, I want to get involved in understanding more. Stage 3 is, I get it now, sign me up. And if that final group is 10 strong or 50 or 100, either way, we'll find a way to make it work. It's not going to be 100 though, is it? So it's understanding where people are in terms of that interest piece. And if there's a wider group who we use for peer review and testing now and again, with a smaller core group who drive it forward, that's fine as well. I'm conscious, for me, it's much more about quality than quantity. So I guess just pausing there, I guess, Peter, anything to add before we go into some questions? And I'm conscious, all the things we've shown so far are really early thoughts and ideas. Our aim is that, in terms of reference, is put together by the membership of this group as opposed to some standard ideas.
Yeah, and I think that I totally echo that comment, that those that have joined us on the webinar, and obviously those that have registered an interest and will no doubt be looking at this webinar when they have an opportunity, is that it's not set in stone. We've put the terms of engagement, the reference, whatever term we prefer. Again, that's maybe something the group can agree, but just to give some boundaries. Hopefully there's no boundaries, but just some confines around the group, some early expectation, particularly what you've echoed there, Jamie, about the commitment and what's involved. If it is an aspect, and for those that have joined us or listening on the recorded version, is that it's not a group as traditionally we've all been part of at some point in our careers, I'm sure, that are talking shops that actually there isn't any action on the back of it. I think initially as a group, we will need to go through that talking and exploratory phase to shape the group in terms of not only terms of engagement, but some of those areas that we address around customer experience and the methodologies and different outputs the group would be looking for. But just want to say that this is really an introductory webinar. We're putting some elements of expectation around what's expected from the group, but I think we're probably on the most paramount side in terms of the commitment we're looking for. I'm aware we've got busy professionals on the webinar and the recorded version, but we are looking for that commitment, and this is only going to work as long as those commitment levels are there. So I guess that is the caveat for anyone listening on this webinar is that we would be expecting that level of commitment, which Jamie articulated really kindly and has explained on the slide there. As a chair and as obviously IWFM head of research, we'll support the group as much as we can, but we do need that expertise to really drive the group forward. And from that perspective, the level of interest has been extremely high. On this webinar alone, we've got very strong numbers because we monitor the numbers as we're having this recording live. And we've got a number of questions through already, Jamie. So I'm aware we promised questions and people can still be firing questions through. There was a question about, and you touched upon it, Jamie, about hundreds. What is the normal size of the group in terms of numbers? I probably can answer that in terms of our other working groups, that it does vary, but as Jamie kindly articulated, it's not necessarily constrained purely to X, we only have X number and no one else is allowed in. We tend to have a core, probably about 8 to 12 individuals of a group. However, that is bigger in some areas. Currently, we have a manufacturing working group, as well as a recently launched healthcare working group, as well as our special interest groups, but they're more confined a little bit around the bylaws, and the size of those groups cannot be a maximum of 12. So they have a core group, but as Jamie was highlighting there, I think we'd certainly be looking at a wider number than just purely 12, because obviously people can bring different expertise in, whether that's peer reviewing, events, content, a different perspective on a particular sector when it comes to customer experience, various different experiences around the whole subject, and that's not just dependent on sector, that's just generally people's career to date, whether that's from its early infancy to a well experienced customer experience professional. We're looking right across the spectrum, and I think this is the beauty of the working groups, that it can operate in that way without any boundaries confined to them. So I just wanted to make that clear. At the moment, to make it really work, like any group, there's probably less than double figures normally of a real core of a group that drives stuff forward. But at the moment, we're not confining the number just purely to say it must be 12 and there's no more than that. I think, again, the nature of the subject will warrant more than 12 people, certainly more than 12 people on it. So hopefully that's answered that particular question. Jamie, we've got an interesting question through about, would the group look at the differences? And I probably alluded it when I mentioned about sector, but also from the perspective of customer experience across private and public sectors, which I've had the pleasure myself of working both in the private public sectors, and they are very different. And I'm just answering that purely from a research perspective. So I just wonder, from a customer experience group, would that be something, just as kindly answer a question from one of the participants, is that something that possibly the group could look at?
Absolutely. And again, I've worked in both public and private environments in facilities management, and I think my experience is some of it is very, very similar, if not the same, but there are big differences. And I recall a really heated discussion with some civil servants about the use of the term customer, and they were adamant that we could not use the term customer because customers make a decision to buy a product and our people don't. And understanding the different culture and environments, I think, is really key. The concept of understanding how you provide a service to a person and how they receive it and their experience and how you measure it and improve it, that's common, whether it's public, private, in-house, outsource, Australian, Czech, British, whatever. But the nuances, the mechanisms can be very different. And I think understanding the sophistication around that, I think, is really key. So yes, absolutely. And I think terminology is important, as is some of the reticence sometimes to give feedback. So Net Promoter Score, very, very popular in private sector. Public sector people can be far more cautious about it and this recommending piece. But absolutely, understanding how we define best practice, how we support it, regardless of the industry sector within the workplace, regardless of whether it's self-delivered or outsourced, that's an absolutely key thing for us to work through, I think, in terms of where is there common expertise we can advise on, and therefore where do we give guidance on the nuances in terms of the individual environment as well. A private sector retail bank using FM, I think, will have a very different way of looking at how we serve them as opposed to a government department or local authority. So core principles consistent, but the nuances of the sector and the environment can be very different. And I think our role could be, probably should be, but could be, to give our members guidance on that. So regardless of who they're working with, there's a toolkit, processes they can use to really demonstrate that customer effort piece within the environment they're in.
No, that's great. And it probably follows up a question from a gentleman on the webinar I know very well, who kindly helped to support a lot of our BIM activity, building information modeling, in terms of output and content. So thank you, Dave, for the question. I totally understand where this is coming from. He's asked Jamie from the group about ensuring that the group will have an international dimension and criteria. So we've talked about public, private, we've alluded briefly to sectoral. I just wondered from your perspective, and I could certainly answer this, the group having an international dimension and criteria.
I guess the glib answer is absolutely. What that means and how it comes to fruition, great thing to discuss. So I know the international CEWG, one of the most confident and well established. I think working with them, I think, would be really interesting. And again, in terms of different geographies, some very common environments. I worked in India, and there's some processes, behaviors, techniques, the same, absolutely. Other areas, wildly different. I think my aspiration would be, regardless of where you are in the world, the sector you're in, who your client is, if you're using this working group's thought leadership within the Institute, we've got some ideas for you and some best practice. I think our job over time is to finesse it so that regardless of how you want to apply it, it works for you, and it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Clearly, we're talking years to get to this, and it has to do with the appetite as well. But I think the more generic things are, the less applicable. I think my desire is that people see this as a really rich source of stuff they can use to make their job better, their organization more successful, and their customer happier. And therefore, it comes down to how we make it very applicable and very usable for our members' application.
That's great. And this proves to me that people were actually listening to my part of the section of the webinar. So thanks for your question, Jeff. Probably followed on from your bio, Jamie, about obviously your role at ICS. And the question there from Jeff, thanks again, Jeff, is do you anticipate close collaboration between this IWFM group and the ICS? So I just didn't know, Jamie, from your perspective, is there any early thoughts about potentially that word I alluded to earlier, collaboration?
It's a thing to explore. So probably a couple of years ago, James Sutton, who was the BIFM CEO, as was then, met Joe Corsons, who was and is the ICS CEO, to talk about BIFM ICS collaboration, and it went well, but it wasn't right to go forward as a concept. Understanding key collaboration and key working relationships, I think, would be a key thing for us to work through, because aside from the ICS, there are other organisations that we can learn from, and vice versa. So yes, potentially. I think one of the key aspects of our first few meetings and our grounding as a group is to work out what we're for, what our aspirations are, who our partners could be, who we champion and challenge. So glibly, absolutely. What that means in detail, don't know. Great thing to explore.
Oh, that's great. Sorry, I was just finding the unmute button. You would have thought I got used to this system by now. I've had a couple of questions in from Sue and Helen, respectively, and rightly so. But I think this will either agree or disagree with me, Jamie. That's always good customer experience to say what you think initially. Not always the time, but with Sue and Helen's questions, it's probably more alluding to, well, they are alluding to anticipation on the time commitment. So what actually will that be? And I guess we're getting to the very pragmatic questions around how many conference calls, face-to-face meetings? My first reaction to that, Helen and Sue, respectively, is that's something that the terms of engagement and the group will decide and drive. But I didn't know, Jamie, as chair, did you have any thoughts on that or articulate and answer those questions better than I've just done?
I'll say the same thing differently, I think. So, official answer, that's for us to decide. Practically, we're all busy. So, in terms of me, Jamie, anything that involved more than one longish evening event a month, anything that was more than a longish conference call 2 or so times a month might become a burden. And I said, if the outcome is we see this diary note coming, thinking, oh God, it's that time again, then we've lost it. I think it's much better we decide to do a few things brilliantly in the first year, I'm just making this up now, with no more than 4 or 5 or 6 hours a month of our time doing it, as opposed to a big flurry of excitement activity and we'll get burned out. And also organizations begin to begrudge the time, that will be bad. So it's got to be sustaining, self-sufficient, and recognizing we're busy. But with a gun to my head, if I was involved in an evening workshop, meaty, seminar-y thing once a month, and had an hour conference call once a fortnight, and I did a bit of offline work, that will be okay, I think. But obviously it comes down to people's commitments and roles. We have busy times with members dropping out for a few months and then being able to get involved again. So as Peter said, key things in terms of reference, but this isn't a job. This is a thing we're going to want to do because it's fun, invigorating, and doesn't get in the way of our day job and our own personal lives as well. In terms of the face-to-face remote piece, clearly in the present climate, face-to-face is going to be a challenge. But in the early days, when you're co-creating, designing, Teams and Skype and webinars can't always tick that creativity piece. And around relationships, I think if there's a core team of 10, 12, 20, whatever, the relationship's really key. So I think there would be more of a balance towards face-to-face activity, albeit masked up with lots of hand gel in the early days when we're building those links, and then a move towards more remote activity and engagement going forward. But as soon as it becomes I haven't got time for this, then we've lost it. So for me, that normal life, work life, project balance piece is really key.
Yeah, no, I think to highlight there, we have a number of members on this that are international, let alone a comment here from Helen, and respectfully, hope she don't mind indicating her location is Durham. I think with the technology we have now, we really shouldn't be seeing the location as a barrier, and I think we will use this group and adopt the technologies that allow people that have shown an interest in this group to contribute to the group, no matter where they're located, whether that's respectively in Durham or Dubai, within reason. So I think within that is giving assurances that we use the right methodologies and software as much as we can. And absolutely. I do fully get the point, and it's something we've heard, and I appreciate the comment that's just come in about the balance between not being London centric. I know it's very easily said with an accent such as mine. Something as an institute, we do get accused off of the M25 corridor. We certainly don't want that. We want the expertise, as I already said, no matter where you're based, because this is really a working group, and we need to broaden that just from a London viewpoint alone, let alone to allow it to be a UK and international footprint ideally as well. So I just hope for those members that aren't based in the London M25 corridor, but they don't actually see this as a barrier from the outset, we ensure and encourage that we use the technology and you be part of this group as much as we can on that.
And as I live in Manchester, this won't be a London-centric group.
There you go. You know where the chair's located as well. I've got a little and thank you for the comments in terms of someone validating Jamie in terms of actually being one of the judges on the awards. So thank you for the comment there. I won't divulge who it is, but just commenting, definitely a very knowledgeable person to lead the general at this great initiative. So thank you very much for that feedback and just validating what I said about the awards in Jamie's bio. So
that's lovely.
that's
Thank
always
you.
good to hear, Jamie, that it's actually true and you won an award. Actually coming from the judge that judged on it. So a small world. So there you go. So I guess we've not got any more questions in. For just looking through, so we've had quite a few on there. Is there anything you want to add, Jamie, just around the question section? I know we've just gone through the respective listeners' questions. I just wondered, is there anything that you want to get across under this section, and then we probably talk about next steps?
Yeah, a few things. So I've done a bit of a long list of stuff that could be in our remit. And I like the idea of having a toolkit of customer experience stuff that we sort of own and refresh, that members and individuals can tap into. Things like customer insight. So how we measure people's experience of workplace and FM. And we discussed customer satisfaction, NPS. So how we measure stuff, the right tools for understanding what customers think, and then how that's used to drive continuous improvement and best practice around using feedback on the workplace to make things better. I've always been very passionate that the FM help desk is the absolute heartbeat of the service. Whether it's self-raised jobs or through a portal or phone calls, the help desk really drives the service. So best practice over the customer help desk and FM, that could be interesting. We talk a lot about the customer experience. For me, that works both physically, so the journey of going into a building through the parking, reception, security, to the toilets and canteens, but also the emotional journey in terms of how you engage the building you work in. So understanding those and mapping those journeys, that could be a key thing. We mentioned awards, so awards, accreditation and standards, how we set and help raise the bar for that as well. And training. Customer experience has got little to do with the tools we use or the processes or our vans or the SIP and digital regulations. It's the people. So the role we can have in helping to ensure that customer experience training and coaching has got the right insight in it and is driven, that could be as well. So I think in our first few meetings, there must be 10 or 15 areas we can begin to think about. Where do you want to play in this and how do you do it and how do you prioritize it? Because there are a bunch of part-time people doing this at a goodwill. So making sure we do a few things brilliantly, I think, is the right approach. So understanding what our mission is, what our roadmap is, and the things we want to begin to play with, for me, that's quite a key piece. I think in terms of next steps, hugely grateful that people have dialed in and listened to this, either live or recording. I guess that was the first expression of interest. I think the second thing is people then saying, based upon all of this, I'm keen to get involved in helping to shape it and work it out. So I think if people, I guess Peter, you can share the means for that, but if people can reflect and ponder on what we've said and then sign up for stage 2, which is, I want to help shape this, that would be really good. And then for me, then stage 3 is when it's shaped, people then sign up and say, I understand now, I want to come on the journey. And I think at that point, we then say, let's get together face to face somewhere with the ability for folk to dial in as well, to begin to work through in detail. So for me, we're still in the very early shaping processes, but I think understanding people's desire to help shape it, for me, that's the next critical step.
Yeah, and certainly just to let the listeners that are live with us now, and those that be recorded, this webinar will go on the website, but we will be sending correspondence out purely about links to this webinar to get to know about the group that you've registered an interest in, and also the details about how you actually confirm that level of interest. And hopefully from today's webinar, and again it's setting the scene as promised to start as I finished, around the terms of reference sounds very formal, but we're saying that they're there to be shaped by the group. We've given some early expectations. You've heard from the chair today in terms of his background, some of his expectations around the group. We've had some views from members that have joined us today about some concerns, and hopefully we've addressed them, that we're making this open and be using the technology. So location shouldn't be seen as a barrier. But certainly after this, the webinar will be cascaded out to all that's registered, and we had, and it's worth pointing, which I may have said at the start, a huge amount of interest in this group, particularly around this subject, and particularly very close to workplace and FM. And that was just recognised in the numbers we got in terms of registrations, and respectively how many people have actually joined us for this live webinar. So those that have kindly all registered will receive this, and there will be a mechanism of actually registering your interest formally. So from that point of view, look out for that email, and that will be shortly with you, probably next week, I hasten to add. So look out from that from the IWFM. In the meantime, LinkedIn with me and Jamie, again, another good experience tool, customer experience tool. Some people like LinkedIn, but I'm more than happy that if you want to LinkedIn with me and message me that way, if for whatever reason the comms doesn't arrive, if you've got any questions that you want to speak to me, then I'm more than happy for you to approach myself on LinkedIn that way, if you want to communicate via that channel as well, I hasten to add. So from that point of view, I don't know, Jamie, is there anything you want to add further as a close, if that's okay?
Just to say, I'm delighted and excited to be part of this. Really grateful for Peter and the Institute's support for it. My aim is that, as I say, in 3 or 4 years' time, when people are asked to think about a great experience, more and more use workplace and FM as an example of great people doing stuff. And this isn't about making it happen, because it's happening, but I think as an industry, we're very inconsistent and a bit internally focused, and I think we can shout more about it. So delighted to be part of that shouting.
And that's great. And again, it's not something at IWFM. This is only as good as the volunteers behind it. And I said from the early days, and this webinar, as well as the registrations, the interest level has been extremely high, just to make that point again. So as I say, look out for that correspondence and comms. It'll be with you shortly. And again, thank you for those that have actually joined this webinar. As Jamie and myself alluded to, we know you're extremely busy people with your respective jobs. Taking an hour out of for a webinar now is getting harder and harder, I hasten to add, because of everyone's busy schedule. But thank you for those that have joined this webinar, and obviously those that are looking back on this recorded. But as I like to say, this group will only be as good as the members around it, and already I can see from today that we've got a strong appetite when it comes to the customer experience group. And again, thank you, Jamie, for today, as well as your support in coming forward as chair with your experience. Will be greatly received in pushing this group forward and meeting the goals respectively of what the group wants to achieve. And I think that's the beauty, but be there and shape its journey. So for me, it's exciting, it's important, and certainly an area that is so paramount to workplace and FM, hence the interest. So thank you again. That's enough from me. Thank you, Jamie. And as I say, look out for that comms again. Okay, cheers. Bye.